So, have you ever been sitting on a couch, maybe holding hands with someone who genuinely cares about you, and you just realize,
That you've never felt more utterly alone in your life.
yes,
Oh.
exactly that. It is just this completely disorienting experience, right? Because physically you're together,
Right, the affection is objectively there.
right? But you still feel entirely unseen. Like you're sitting right next to them, but you're separated by this invisible pane of glass. And that is exactly what we're getting into in today's deep dive.
Yeah, it's such a profound and honestly a incredibly common emotional landscape.
Yep.
The text we're looking at today refers to this as quiet grief.
Quiet grief. Wow.
Yeah, it's this very specific kind of loneliness that lives right inside of a connection. It happens in the gap between the love that is being offered to you and the love your nervous system actually needs to feel, safe and recognized.
And I think what makes this so confusing for people, what makes us feel crazy when it happens, is that it's usually not malicious.
Not at all.
We aren't talking about like toxic relationships or intentional neglect here. You can literally have a partner or a friend or a parent sitting right next to you who is loving you as hard as they possibly can.
They're putting in the effort. They really are.
Right. They're trying, but their method of loving simply isn't translating into your language. So the alignment is just fundamentally off.
Exactly. You realize the person is trying, but their fluency just doesn't match your hunger.
Which brings us to this really uncomfortable question, right? What do we actually do when we encounter that mismatch?
Usually.
The wrong thing.
Pretty much always the wrong thing.
Yeah.
Because the default human reflex to that quiet grief is almost universal, and it's entirely counterproductive. Instead of stepping forward and bridging the gap by, asking for what we need,
We go on the defense. We pull back. We shrink.
right, we make ourselves smaller to fit the love that happens to be available. Or, on the flip side, we start performing.
Oh, the performance. Yeah.
We curate this version of ourselves that we think is more palatable,
Hmm.
specifically tailored to whatever language the person in front of us happens to speak.
And then we end up in this weird dynamic of like managed intimacy. We start resorting to half measures.
Exactly. We parcel out our own care in these very calculated, careful little doses.
Okay.
Because the primary goal shifts, right? It goes
Yeah.
from nourishing the relationship to just protecting ourselves.
We love at whatever level we feel safe. We open up just enough so that we can like quickly close the door if things go wrong, which ensures we never truly get hurt, but
It also ensures we never truly connect.
right. Okay, let's unpack this with an analogy from the source material because I think it perfectly grounds what we're talking about. Think about it like someone making you this massive, beautiful feast.
A literal feast.
Right. They spent all day cooking, but you happen to be allergic to almost everything on the table. You appreciate the effort, obviously, but you're still starving. And instead of just saying, hey, I actually can't eat this, you pretend to eat. You take these tiny strategic bites, you smile, and you just slowly shrink away, getting hungrier by the minute because you don't want to seem ungrateful.
So tragic when you picture it that way.
Hmm.
And if we take that feast analogy a step further, the managed intimacy happens when you start sneaking your own snacks into the dining room.
Oh my gosh, yes. Hiding a protein bar in your pocket.
Exactly. You hide a protein bar so you don't pass out. But you never actually tell the host you're allergic, which means you effectively ensure they never learn how to actually cook for you.
Wow.
You're surviving the dinner, but you're preventing any real nourishment from happening at that table. You are literally starving in front of a feast because you're terrified to name your own hunger.
So we're just left with this world of half measures, right? Where everyone is basically eating hidden protein bars and pretending to be full.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the text offers this radical alternative, an entirely different way of operating that just flips this defensive posture upside down.
And the core premise is this. Love her how you want to be loved. Love him how you want to be loved. Love them how you want to be loved.
It sounds deceptively simple on the surface, right?
Right, almost like a variation of the golden rule we all learned in kindergarten. Treat others how you want to be treated.
Exactly. But when you apply that to the complex architecture of adult intimacy, it is infinitely more demanding.
Okay, hold on. I need to stop us here. Because when I first read that premise, loving someone how you want to be loved, it honestly sounded dangerously close to just projecting your own needs onto someone else.
Right. It sounds a bit selfish at first glance.
Yeah. Like if I'm the kind of person who craves constant physical affection and I just start hugging a partner who absolutely hates being touched, aren't I just calling my own selfishness care? That seems like a terrible recipe for a relationship.
That is the most common trap people fall into with this concept, and the text addresses it beautifully. It is vital to pull that apart because this is absolutely not about imposing your literal preferred actions onto someone else.
Okay, so it's not about the literal hug.
Right. It is much subtler than that. It's about identifying the underlying quality, the actual texture of the love you're most hungry for, and then translating that quality into a language the other person can receive.
Okay, so mechanically, how does that translation actually work? Let's stick with the hug example. If I want a hug, but my partner hates touch, what am I actually supposed to be doing?
You have to ask yourself why you want the hug. What is the emotional data underneath that physical action? Usually, you want physical touch because it makes you feel safe, grounded, or anchored when you're stressed.
Right, it's that baseline feeling of security.
Exactly. So the goal isn't to force the physical hug onto someone who doesn't want it. The goal is to ask, how can I make my partner feel safe, grounded, and anchored in their language?
Oh, I see.
Maybe for a touch-averse partner, that feeling of safety is created when you make them a cup of coffee in the morning without them asking, or when you give them an hour of uninterrupted quiet time after work.
You're delivering the exact quality of love you crave, that baseline of safety, but at a register they can actually absorb. That is fascinating.
You are operating at the absolute highest level of your own emotional intelligence. And the text points out, you aren't doing it just to guarantee a return on your investment. You're doing it because love, practiced at the level of your own deepest longing, is the highest caliber of love you know how to give.
And it really forces you to get incredibly specific about what you actually want, because we tend to talk about love in these vague, abstract terms, right? Like, I just want to be loved.
Right, which means nothing practical.
Exactly. But this framework challenges you to ask yourself what kind of presence you actually crave, practically speaking. And the examples in the text here are just striking. It asks, do you want to be seen steadily, across time, without having to earn your spot in the relationship every single encounter?
The relief of not having to perform for your love every day, that is huge.
It really is, and it goes deeper. Do you want to be touched as if your body is a place worth arriving at? Do you want your ideas taken seriously, engaged with, and pushed against with real, undivided attention?
Yes.
Do you want someone to sit in your heaviness with you without instantly trying to fix it or, like, rush you toward the light? Do you want to be chosen out loud, in public, not just tolerated in the quiet moments?
Notice how we naturally frame those deep, vulnerable desires as neediness. I mean, society basically conditions us to view that level of specificity as vanity or as being too much.
Oh, 100%. We're told to just be low maintenance.
Right, but this perspective completely reorients it and frames these incredibly specific desires not as liabilities but as data.
Data. It is a literal map.
It is a map of the exact love that would reach you. Once you have that map mapped out, you can feel the shape of the love that would land in you, as the author says, like water in dry ground.
Like water in dry ground.
It would just absorb instantly because
Yeah.
it's exactly what has been missing your entire life.
But here is the uncomfortable catch. Because once you possess this map, once you finally have a clear picture of exactly what you want, you are suddenly forced to look in the mirror.
Yeah, the pivot from self-discovery to self-reflection.
Exactly. The journey moves from this empowering realization right into some deeply uncomfortable reflection about how you have been operating in the world.
Because once you intimately understand your own hunger, you inevitably realize what you've been feeding to others.
Yeah.
You know what that specific hunger feels like, which means you know its exact opposite. And that is when you start to see the deficit you have been operating from in your own relationships.
The source calls it the inheritance of deficit, which is such a powerful phrase. Think about the broken language of love we inherit from our pasts.
Right.
If you grew up in a house where affection was only given when you achieved something, you learn a vocabulary of conditional care. If you had a previous relationship where vulnerability was punished, you learn a vocabulary of withheld affection.
And we just keep speaking these fractured languages to new people, to innocent bystanders, basically, because it's our only fluency. It's all we know how to speak.
Right. When you look back at the love you've been giving, the distracted presence while looking at your phone, the affection with strings attached, the intimacy you rationed out because you were scared of getting hurt, you see the undeniable truth.
You've been doing to others exactly what has been done to you.
Yes. And not out of cruelty either. We rarely try to intentionally hurt the people we care about. We're just passing the lack forward.
We're just handing them the empty plate we were given.
Exactly. But the entire point of this practice, loving someone how you want to be loved, is to step outside that inheritance entirely. It is breaking the cycle.
It really is.
It's looking at the person in front of you and saying, I know exactly what it feels like to be on the receiving end of this particular lack. I know how much it hurts, and I refuse to produce that lack in you.
Which brings up a really critical distinction about the nature of giving. Because deciding to break a generational or historical cycle sounds utterly exhausting if you approach it the wrong way.
Right.
A lot of people confuse unconditional love with martyrdom.
People absolutely do. We think being a good partner means sacrificing until there is nothing left of us. But martyrdom is giving without internal alignment.
Yeah.
Martyrdom performs generosity while quietly accumulating grievance. You give, but you're keeping a mental scoreboard, and you are slowly building resentment because you aren't actually aligned with what you were doing.
You're performing the feast, but you're furious that nobody notices you're starving.
Yes, exactly. You're washing the dishes but slamming the cabinets.
Right. And the alternative to martyrdom that the text presents is craftsmanship. When you press into your own longing so deeply that you know its exact shape, you use that knowledge the way a master craftsman uses a mold.
Okay, I like that.
You're producing something precise. You become a conduit. When you love from that deeply aligned, authentic place, the giving doesn't deplete you the way a performance does. The love moves through you.
Because it is the exact specific love you have always needed. Simply the act of channeling it into the world means that some part of you receives it too. You heal your own starvation by learning how to cook the exact meal you always wanted and then feeding it to someone else.
It is a profound psychological mechanism. But, this isn't just a modern therapy trick. To really understand the weight of this, we have to zoom out.
Let's do it. Zoom out.
We have to look at how human connection used to be understood before we basically industrialized our emotions. If you look at the oldest historical traditions, specifically ancient goddess traditions, long before human love was divided into this modern binary of either cheap sentimentality or cold calculated transaction.
Which is pretty much where we are now.
Totally. But back then, love was understood fundamentally as a practice of transmission, not exchange.
Transmission, not exchange. Meaning we aren't trading commodities. I'm not giving you 3 units of love today so that you're legally obligated to give me 3 units back tomorrow.
Precisely. Capitalism has basically trained us to view our emotional energy as currency to be hoarded and spent wisely.
Wow, yeah.
But in these ancient traditions, they use the example of a mother. A mother doesn't love a newborn child in order to be loved back. The infant cannot offer an equal exchange of emotional support.
Obviously not.
She loves the child because her love is a force she is built to conduct. The conducting itself is part of her nature, her health, and her wholeness. The love doesn't diminish by leaving her. It multiplies in the movement.
That is beautiful.
You're not spending yourself like coins in a bank. You're conducting a force that is already flowing through you.
Let's bring this down to, like, a mundane Tuesday night in a modern relationship. The dishes. Or texting back, we treat love like a legal ledger. I plan the last date, so it's their turn to plan this one. Or, I did the dishes yesterday, so I'm not lifting a finger tonight.
We are so obsessed with keeping the scales perfectly balanced.
We really are. But there's this paradigm-shifting idea in the text. Fairness is a legal concept. Love is a living one.
That's the quote right there. If you wait for fairness, you severely limit your own capacity to experience love.
Yeah.
The people in your life, even the ones who confuse you, or the ones who occasionally take you for granted, they don't need to be the perfect recipients for you to practice loving well. They don't have to love you back in kind for your act of loving to be valid.
Because it isn't about them validating your output, it's about you existing at the highest register of your own capacity. If you withhold your affection until you find someone who perfectly matches your output, you're going to spend your life emotionally atrophied.
And the stakes of that atrophy are immense. If we connect this to the bigger picture, what you practice in your personal relationships, the literal way you touch people, the presence you bring into a room when someone walks in, the attention you offer when a colleague is speaking to you, it is not just interpersonal housekeeping.
No.
It's a cosmological vote.
Every interaction is a vote for the reality you want to live in. If you're parceling out care in self-protective half measures, if you're keeping score and withholding affection because you're afraid of looking foolish, you are actively voting for a world defined by half measures, transactional relationships, and fear.
You are reinforcing the very environment that made you lonely in the first place.
Wow. Yeah.
But imagine a world where love gets passed forward at the absolute highest level you know, where you offer the specific, deep attention you've always craved. That produces a completely different energetic field. You change the atmosphere of the room you're standing in.
So what does this all actually mean for you, listening to this deep dive right now? The ultimate takeaway here is incredibly empowering, really, because it puts the agency entirely back in your hands.
You don't have to wait.
Exactly. You do not need to wait. You don't need to wait for your partner to suddenly become a mind reader. You don't need to wait to find the mythical, perfect person who finally gets it right before you understand what right even looks like.
Because you already know what right looks like.
Mm.
You know because you have wanted it your whole life. The specific shape of your loneliness is the exact blueprint of your capacity to love.
Your wanting is not a wound. It's a compass. Use it to navigate how you treat the people around you.
Which leaves us with one final provocative thread to untangle as you go about your day.
Go for it.
If your unmet longing is actually a compass, and your deep historical hunger is actually a blueprint, what happens if you completely stop viewing your past heartbreaks and your quiet loneliness as evidence that you are unlovable?
Okay.
What if, instead, you view every single moment you felt unseen as rigorous training for the love you are now capable of providing?
Yeah.
What if the person who most desperately needs the exact specific kind of love you've been starving for
Is actually the very next person you speak to today?
exactly?
Think about that massive, beautiful feast again. You aren't allergic to it anymore because you're the one cooking it. And the person sitting right next to you on the couch, they might be just as hungry as you are.